The wind carried the scent of rain as Charlotte and Cohen stood at the edge of the valley, the vast wilderness stretching before them. For weeks, they had moved through the land, covering their tracks, staying ahead of danger. But no matter how far they went, she knew Jeb would not stop hunting her. He was the kind of man who saw people as possessions, and losing her had wounded his pride. He would not allow it. Cohen had known this, too. That was why, hours earlier, he had stopped their journey and really listened, to the silence between the trees. It was a hunter's silence. The birds had gone still. The forest had held its breath. "They are close," Cohen had said. Charlotte's hands had curled into fists. "Then we end it." Now, as they crouched in the underbrush, waiting, she felt her heart pounding against her ribs. The forest was thick with shadow, the air charged with the weight of what was coming. She tightened her grip on the knife Cohen had given her, its hilt smooth in her palm. She had trained for this moment. She would not cower. The first movement came from the west, a flicker of motion through the trees. Then another, closer. 5 men, armed and careful, their movements practiced. Jeb had brought his best. He had learned from his mistakes. And yet, he had not learned enough. Cohen was already in motion, moving with the silence of a predator. Charlotte followed, every lesson he had taught her thrumming through her veins. She was no longer the helpless girl who had been dragged from her father's home. She was something new. A whistle cut through the air, a signal from Jeb's man. Charlotte tensed. Cohen raised his bow. The string whispered as he pulled it back. Then chaos. The first arrow struck home before the outlaws even knew they had been seen. A man crumpled with a gurgled cry, clutching his throat. The others spun, rifles raising, but the forest betrayed them. Charlotte and Cohen had chosen this battleground well. Gunfire split the night. Charlotte ducked behind a tree, her pulse roaring in her ears. She saw Jeb then, his broad form moving to the trees, his face twisted in frustration. He had not expected this. He had expected her to run, to beg. She was done running. A shadow moved near her, one of Jeb's men. He had not seen her yet. Charlotte gripped her knife, every instinct screaming at her to act. She lunged. The blade found flesh. The man gasped, stumbling backward. Charlotte yanked the knife free, her breath coming in sharp bursts. The man fell, his eyes wide with shock. She had done that. No time for hesitation. Cohen was locked in combat with another outlaw, their blades flashing in the firelight. He was faster, stronger. The outlaw fell with a grunt, but Cohen did not pause. He turned, searching for her. Their eyes met. She was still standing. Then Jeb was there. "Charlotte," he snarled. His gun was raised, his face a mask of fury. She did not flinch. She did not plead. Jeb's hand tightened on the trigger. But Cohen was faster. A knife flew through the air, striking Jeb's wrist. He bellowed in pain, the gun clattering to the ground. Charlotte moved without thinking. She ran at him, shoving him back. He stumbled, off balance. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something other than rage in them. He saw death. She did not give him time to recover. With one last, desperate push, she sent him tumbling backward. He staggered, his boot catching on a root, and then he was falling, crashing down the embankment, disappearing into the darkness below. Silence. Charlotte stood there, her chest heaving, her hands trembling. She had won. She had freed herself. She turned, and Cohen was there. His gaze held hers, unreadable, steady. He stepped closer, his hand brushing against hers. She did not pull away. "It is over," he said softly. A breath she hadn't realized she was holding escaped her lips. It was over. The rain began to fall, gentle at first, then heavier, washing away the blood, the fear, the past. Charlotte turned her face to the sky, letting it cleanse her. When she looked back at Cohen, she saw something new in his eyes. Not just understanding, not just respect. Something deeper. She took his hand. He did not resist. "Where do we go now?" she whispered. Cohen's thumb brushed over her knuckles, a quiet promise in the touch. "Wherever you choose." For the first time in her life, she had a choice, and she knew without doubt that she would walk beside him. She smiled. Then let's go. The cabin walls creaked against the wind, the fire's glow flickering across the rough-hewn logs. Ellie sat on the edge of the narrow cot, her fingers absently tracing the fresh bandage on her arm. The pain had dulled to a steady throb, but the unease twisting in her stomach had only grown. Nathaniel Calloway had saved her life, but that didn't mean she could trust him. He had barely spoken since dragging her from the river, and what little he did say was measured, cautious. He wasn't a man accustomed to company. That much was clear. His cabin was sparse. Just a cot, a table, a single chair, and a cast-iron stove. The only indulgence was a rifle prop near the door, polished and well cared for. Outside, the forest loomed, vast and impenetrable. It had swallowed her pursuers for now, but they would return. She had seen the way those men had cut down the people at the trading post, ruthless, efficient. If they were after her, they wouldn't stop until she was dead. A gust of wind rattled the shutters, and Ellie flinched. Across the room, Nate didn't move, his gaze fixed on the flames. "They'll be looking," she said, testing his reaction. He exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over his beard. "They won't find you tonight." That wasn't the comfort she had hoped for. Silence stretched between them, thick as the shadows beyond the cabin walls. The only sounds of the pop of burning wood and the distant howl of a wolf. "You live out here alone?" she asked. A muscle in his jaw twitched. "Yeah." A lie. Her eyes flickered to the second cot in the corner, neatly made but dustless, as though someone had used it recently. A wooden carving of a horse sat on the small table beside it, the details worn smooth by years of handling. A child's carving, she realized. Ellie shivered, suddenly colder than before. She pulled the rough blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I should leave in the morning." "You're in no condition to go anywhere." She frowned. "If I stay, I put you in danger." Nate leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His expression was unreadable, but there was something guarded in his eyes. "They were willing to kill a dozen people at that trading post just to get to you. That means you're already in danger, and so is anyone who helps you." Ellie swallowed hard. He wasn't wrong. But there was more to it. There had to be. A man didn't survive alone in the wilderness unless he had something to hide. "Who were they?" he asked. She hesitated. "I don't know." Another lie. His gaze sharpened, but he didn't call her on it. Instead, he rose, grabbing his rifle as he moved toward the door. "Get some rest." She watched as he stepped outside, the cold air rushing in before the door thudded shut behind him. For a long time, she sat there, staring at the closed door. Then, slowly, she stood, her limbs stiff and aching. She moved carefully through the cabin, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. Nate had left a lantern burning low on the table, casting long shadows across the walls. Her fingers drifted over the second cot again, over the smooth wooden carving. Who had slept here? She turned toward the only other door in the cabin, the one she had noticed earlier, iron-bolted at the base of the wall, the locked door. Her pulse quickened. Nate hadn't said a word about it, hadn't explained why a man living alone needed a reinforced door in the floor of his cabin. Ellie crouched, pressing her ear against the wood. Silence. She glanced toward the door Nate had left through. If he was keeping something dangerous down there, she needed to know. Her fingers brushed the metal latch. Locked. She exhaled, frustration curling in her chest. Then she noticed something beside the stove, a ring of keys hanging from a nail. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears as she crossed the room. She hesitated only a moment before lifting them from the hook, the metal cold in her hands. Back at the locked door, she tested the first key. No luck. The second didn't fit either. The third, a soft click. The lock released. Ellie hesitated, breath caught in her throat. Then, carefully, she lifted the door. The lantern's glow spilled into the darkness below, revealing a steep wooden staircase. The air that rose up was stale, thick with dust and something else, something faintly metallic. Blood. She swallowed hard, gripping the lantern as she descended. The cellar was small, lined with shelves of dried goods and supplies. But her eyes locked onto the farthest corner, where the metallic scent was strongest. A cot, A rust-colored stain spread across the fabric, dark and old. Chains lay discarded on the floor nearby, broken and twisted. Her stomach lurched. A prisoner. Someone had been held here. Footsteps creaked above. She turned sharply, heart hammering. The door slammed shut. Darkness swallowed her. A second later, the bolt slid into place. Trapped, she shot forward, slamming her fist against the wood. Nate! No response. Her pulse pounded, her breathing uneven. She had been right not to trust him. Then, just as suddenly as it had shut, the door swung open again. Nathaniel stood at the top of the stairs, his rifle resting casually in one hand. But there was nothing casual about his expression. You shouldn't have done that. Her hands curled into fists. Who was down here? He stared at her for a long moment, then exhaled through his nose. Come upstairs. She didn't move. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration tightening his features. I'm not going to hurt you, Ellie, but you need to come upstairs. Now! Slowly, warily, she stepped past him and climbed the stairs. The moment she was clear, he shut the cellar door and locked again. She turned to face him, anger and fear twisting together in her chest. You kept someone down there. His jaw tightened. I was keeping them safe. Ellie scoffed. That's what they all say. For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. A shadow of something deeper, older. He set the rifle against the wall and sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. It was my wife, he said finally, and my son. Ellie froze. They were Cheyenne, he continued, his voice quieter now. I built that cellar to hide them. Thought I could keep them safe when the soldiers came. Her breath caught. She knew how that story ended. He sat down heavily in the chair, staring at the fire as though he could still see something there that no longer existed. I wasn't here when they came. I was out hunting. By the time I got back, the cellar was open. He shook his head. I found my wife in the woods. My son. His voice caught for the first time. He swallowed hard. He was only 8. Ellie felt the cold seep deeper into her bones. They blamed me, Nate said. The soldiers said I was a traitor for taking a Cheyenne wife. Said I deserted. His fingers curled into fists. I ran. I've been running ever since. A long silence stretched between them. Ellie looked at the locked door again. Not a prison. A refuge. But she also knew something else. The men who had killed Nate's family. Men like them had slaughtered the trading post. And they were still hunting her. She met his gaze. They won't stop. His expression hardened. I know. The fire flickered, throwing shadows against the walls. Ellie swallowed the lump in her throat. She had thought she was alone in this fight. Maybe she wasn't. Dawn broke in pale streaks of silver through the dense canopy, the air thick with the damp scent of earth and pine. Ellie sat at the edge of the cot, rolling her injured shoulder, testing the stiffness in her arm. The pain was manageable now, though it served as a reminder she had barely survived. Next time, she might not be so lucky. Nathaniel stood by the door, sharpening a knife with slow, deliberate strokes. He hadn't spoken much since last night. Then again, neither had she. The truth about his past lingered between them like a ghost, heavy and unspoken. She had spent half the night staring at the ceiling, trying to decide whether she had made a mistake trusting him. But something in his story had cut through her doubt. She knew what it was to lose everything. She knew what it was to be hunted. The problem was, so did the men tracking her. Ellie exhaled sharply and stood, adjusting the blanket draped over her shoulders. I need a horse, she said. A gun. Nate didn't look up. Where would you go? As far from here as I can. Won't be far enough. She bristled. You don't know that. He finally lifted his gaze, his expression unreadable. I know men like them. They're not just bounty hunters. He set the knife down, the blade catching the morning light. They don't leave loose ends. A chill passed through her. He was right. She had seen it at the trading post. The senseless slaughter, the way the bodies had been left where they fell. The men after her didn't just want to catch her. They wanted to erase her. Ellie swallowed hard. Then what do you suggest? Nate leaned back against the table, arms crossed. You tell me why they want you dead. She clenched her jaw. She had evaded that question long enough. But there was no use in lying now. She pulled out the locket from beneath her shirt, the silver chain glinting in the firelight. Slowly, she opened it, revealing the faded portrait inside. A man, dressed in a military coat, his dark eyes cold even in ink. Nate frowned. Who is he? Ellie's fingers tightened around the locket. General William Hardin. His expression darkened. That name carries weight. He's the man responsible for the massacre at Black Creek, she said, voice tight, and half a dozen others. He was supposed to stand trial, but the army protected him. Her breath hitched. I have proof, letters, signed orders. His own words condemning him. Understanding flickered in Nate's eyes. And they'll kill you to keep it buried. Ellie nodded. A friend smuggled the letters out of Fort Bridger. We were supposed to meet at the trading post. She looked away, jaw tightening, but they got there first. Silence settled between them. Nate rubbed a hand over his beard, eyes narrowing in thought. Where's the proof now? She hesitated. I buried it before I ran. It's a half-day's ride from here. He exhaled, thoughtful. Then he stood and reached for his rifle. We leave within the hour. Ellie blinked. You're coming. You think I'm letting you ride out alone, knowing they'll be watching? He shook his head. You'll never make it. She studied him, searching for any sign of deception, but there was only grim certainty in his eyes. Why help me? She asked. His jaw tightened. Because Hardin was there the day my family was taken. A heavy weight pressed against her ribs. She had assumed the men who killed Nate's family had been nameless soldiers, faceless figures of war. But now it was personal. She nodded once. They rode out at dawn, keeping to the tree line where the shadows were thickest. Nate's horse, a sturdy roan gelding, moved with steady ease beneath him. Ellie's borrowed mare was smaller, quick-footed, but restless beneath her inexperienced grip. The landscape stretched vast and endless before them, rolling plains giving way to jagged outcroppings of stone, the river winding like a silver ribbon in the distance. They rode in silence, the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on them. By midday, they reached the spot. A lone cottonwood tree, gnarled and ancient, stood against the wind. Ellie dismounted, her boots sinking into the damp earth as she dropped to her knees and began digging. Her fingers struck metal. She pulled free a small tin box, its edges rusted, the lid sealed tight. Her hands trembled as she pried it open. The letters were still there, brittle but intact. She exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. We need to move, Nate said, eyes scanning the horizon. Ellie nodded, shoving the box into her saddlebag. But as she turned back to her horse, something pricked at the edge of her senses. Silence. The wind had died. The birds had gone still. Nate moved first. Get down. A rifle cracked. The bullet slammed into the tree inches from Ellie's head. She dropped, heart pounding, shouting, footsteps crashing through the brush. Nate fired, the sharp report of his rifle splitting the air. A scream. A body hit the ground. Move. He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the horses. More gunfire. Bullets kicked up dirt around them. Ellie reached for the revolver Nate had given her, fumbling with the unfamiliar weight as she turned and fired blindly. The shot went wide, but it bought them seconds. She scrambled onto the mare's back, gripping the reins tight as Nate swung up beside her. Then they were riding, racing across the open land, hooves pounding, wind whipping past them. A sharp pain tore through her side. She gasped, nearly toppling from the saddle. Ellie, she gritted her teeth, pressing a hand to her ribs. Blood. I'm fine, she lied. They didn't slow. The river loomed ahead, wide and treacherous, its waters swollen from spring melt. They're gaining, Nate called. No time to go around. He met her gaze. Hold on. Then they plunged in. The cold hit like a fist, the current dragging at them. Ellie clung to the reins, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The horses swam hard, nostrils flaring, their bodies straining against the water's grip. Behind them, the men hesitated at the edge, shouting to one another. Then another gunshot cracked through the air. A strangled cry. One of their pursuers toppled into the river, his body vanishing beneath the current. Ellie's heart pounded. They had friends on the other side. Somehow, against all odds, the horses reached the far bank. Nate pulled her from the saddle, his hands firm on her arms. "Are you hit?" She nodded, breathless. "Not bad." His eyes flickered with doubt, but he didn't argue. Instead, he turned, rifle raised. Across the river, the remaining riders hesitated. The current was too strong. They wouldn't risk it. For now. Nate exhaled sharply. "We need to move." Ellie swallowed, her grip tightening on her saddlebag. The letters were safe, but not for long. They had won this fight. But Hardin's men would come again. And next time, there would be no running. The sky was streaked with fire when they reached the ridgeline, the last light of day bleeding across the horizon. Ellie's breath came in sharp bursts, her ribs aching from the wound. Every movement sent fresh pain lancing through her side, but she kept riding, kept pushing forward. She had no choice. Nate was just ahead, his silhouette dark against the dying sun. He pulled his horse to a stop near a rocky outcrop, scanning the land behind them. His rifle was already in his hands. "They'll come," he murmured. Ellie swallowed hard. She knew he was right. Hardin's men wouldn't give up, not when they were this close to erasing her and the truth she carried from existence. She slid from the saddle, gritting her teeth as her boots hit the ground. Her body screamed in protest, but she forced herself to move. They had no time for weakness. "Where do we make our stand?" she asked. Nate gave her a long look, as if measuring her resolve. Then he nodded toward a narrow pass cut between the rocks. "There, we forced them through a bottleneck. Make them come at us one at a time." Ellie followed his gaze, assessing the terrain. The ridge sloped steeply downward, funneling into a tight corridor of jagged stone. It was perfect. A handful of men could hold it against an army. But they weren't an army. They were just two. Still, she nodded. "It'll have to do." Nate dismounted, pulling his rifle from its saddle sling. He moved with calm efficiency, gathering spare ammunition, checking his weapons. There was no hesitation in him, no fear, only the quiet certainty of a man who had already made peace with what was coming. Ellie wasn't there yet. She turned her back to him, steadying her breath as she dug through her saddlebag. The tin box was still there, cool beneath her fingers, proof of Hardin's crimes, proof worth dying for. She clenched her jaw. No, not dying, fighting. The first shot came just as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon. Ellie dropped to the ground, the crack of the rifle echoing through the pass. Stone shattered inches from her shoulder, sending shards flying. "They're here," Nate said, his voice steady. He sighted down his rifle and fired. A distant scream followed. Ellie's pulse pounded. She forced herself to focus, to breathe through the fear. She gripped the revolver Nate had given her, fingers tightening around the worn handle. Shadows moved at the mouth of the pass. 6 men, their figures barely visible in the dim light. They weren't charging blindly. They knew this was a trap. Another shot rang out, ricocheting off the rock near Nate's head. He didn't flinch, just shifted his aim and pulled the trigger again. Another body dropped, but the others kept coming. Ellie braced herself, heart hammering. A figure broke from the shadows, rushing toward them. She fired. The first shot missed. The second didn't. The man crumpled mid-stride. Her breath came fast, her pulse roaring in her ears. There was no time to think, no time to process. Another shadow moved, gun raised. Nate shot first. 3 left. They hesitated now, realizing they had walked into something they hadn't been prepared for. But hesitation wouldn't last. Ellie's fingers were slick with sweat as she reloaded. Her hands were shaking, but she gritted her teeth and forced them steady. A voice called from the darkness. "You don't walk away from this, Calloway." Nate didn't answer. Another shot. Another body hit the dirt. 2 left. Ellie's hands tightened around the revolver. Almost over. Then she heard it, the soft crunch of movement behind them. She spun too late. A hand closed around her wrist, Wrenching the gun from her grip, a second hand slammed into her wounded side. White-hot pain exploded through her ribs. She gasped, vision blurring, as she was yanked backward. An arm locked around her throat, dragging her against a solid chest. She struggled, kicking, clawing, but the grip was like iron. A cold barrel pressed against her temple. Nate turned, rifle raised, and froze. "Drop it," the man behind her growled. Ellie's breath hitched. She knew that voice. Not a bounty hunter. Not some nameless mercenary. Hardin's right hand. Reeves. She had seen him at Black Creek, standing at Hardin's side while the village burned. She had heard his laughter as children screamed. Her stomach twisted. Nate's finger hovered over the trigger. His entire body was rigid, fury burning in his eyes. "I'll kill her," Reeves said. "You know I will." Nate's jaw clenched. Ellie forced herself to think through the haze of pain. She had one chance. One. Slowly, she relaxed in Reeves' grip, letting her weight sag against him. His hold loosened just slightly. It was enough. She drove her elbow into his ribs with every ounce of strength she had left. Reeves grunted, grip slipping. Ellie twisted, grabbing for the knife at his belt. Steel flashed. Pain tore across her forearm, but she didn't stop. She wrenched the knife free and drove it upward, straight into his throat. Reeves made a choke sound, his body jerking. His grip went slack. Ellie stumbled free, gasping for air. Nate fired. Reeves hit the ground. The last man turned to run. Nate shot him in the back. Then silence. Ellie swayed on her feet, the world tilting. Nate caught her before she could fall, one arm steady around her shoulders. "It's over," he said. Ellie forced a weak laugh. "Not yet." She reached into her saddlebag, fingers brushing the tin box. They still had a war to win.